It is Friday, July 13th, 2018. This is Room in the Trees, a podcast about being an artist, making art, and living. Room in the Trees is hosted by Sabrina Ward Harrison and me, Trent Reynolds. And this is episode 51, Your Special Sauce. And here's our conversation with Annabelle Lindquist.
So I want to introduce Annabelle. Annabelle reached out to me a few weeks ago, and you had taken a workshop from me in Maine, Portland, Maine, maybe 10 years ago, we think.
Yeah.
We don't know.
We can't remember. It's that long ago.
Just some sort of decade. And I remember the workshop, but I don't. I totally don't. I remember being on a balcony. I think it's some covered balcony somewhere. And so I had been over the past few months ruminating and thinking about how to translate these workshops and true living experiences that I've been doing over the past 2 decades to sort of parlay them into something that can be offered to people that are not close to me geographically. And I just thought, how am I going to do this? And I want it to be authentic and have a vibrancy to it that can be communicated. And you reached out to me not knowing I was thinking any of these things, and I was scratching my head wondering how to do this, and said, hey, you should be thinking about doing these, translating this stuff into an online course. I was like, yes, I know. You said, I've created this class to help people do that, and I'd be happy to show it to you and talk about it. And I just felt it was sort of this divine, clearly some kind of like, yes, because what I needed bridged the things I needed with someone who knew my work and had experienced my workshops but understood the technical part of translating that. So I signed up for Annabelle's course. And we had this great conversation, I think, within a few days after connecting. And we found out we were born within 2 days of each other or 3 days of each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just had a really great, really sincere, wonderful connection. So I've been doing the course and creating this and building the content and going through this process, and we've been having weekly conversations. So I've just really appreciated them, and really am fascinated by this whole big world of knowledge commerce, and I'm just excited to talk about that further. And Trenton, you had created I know it's old school.
You can call me Trenton.
I know Trenton and I went to high school together years and years ago, so that's what.
And I've grown up into the man who's known as Trent.
So
no longer.
Where was that? In California?
Yeah.
Cool.
So Annabelle, how did yes? So I too have. I've spent actually a lot of time trying to develop online courseware. Thus far, unsuccessful in actually publishing anything. So this is something that I'm really interested in. And when Sabrina said she was working with you, I was, it was obvious to me that we needed to get you on the podcast. But Annabelle, how did you get into? First, just in terms of the story, why did you reach out to Sabrina when you did?
It was just super random. I only use Facebook for I don't really use it personally, but I was just on Facebook one day and I saw that she was doing another live workshop, and I was just thinking, this girl better have an online course going on right now, because I'm so obsessed with them. So I just messaged her and I'm like, you do have an online course happening right now, and if you don't, you need to be doing that ASAP. And she was like, help. This is awesome. Perfect timing.
Yeah.
But how did I get into them? let's see. Well, a few years ago, I was researching how to. Well, I've been doing a lot of online marketing stuff, like learning how to do online marketing in the last few years because I became mysteriously ill and couldn't really do anything. So everything I just started learning from bed, anything I could do from my bed. So online marketing was something that I was super into. Just I wanted to learn how to turn my band into a business, and I've been a full-time artist my whole life. So being an entrepreneur and figuring out how new ways of doing things has always kind of been what I do. And I also have a technical background, so it's like I'm kind of a nerd also. So I was researching marketing and learning how to do online marketing with Marie Forleo's B School, and I had just started taking like online classes, and they were just so amazing. And I also had a blog that is now it's now on the back burner. I took it offline, but I had a blog that just went kind of crazy, and then I wanted to kind of start the blogging thing back up again and figure out a new way of monetizing that without being beholden to advertisers. And so I kind of figured out that online courses were an amazing way to have a digital product without in a new kind of model. So I started researching that, and then very quickly got obsessed with Kajabi, which is one of the all-in-one knowledge commerce platforms out there, which is the industry standard. It's actually, I think, definitely the best. I tried them all, every single one, and even built stuff from scratch using WordPress and stuff, and you used to have to bring in 10 different kinds of software and integrate your members area and your login and your checkout and your autoresponder. There's just so much techie stuff, and it took so long. And once I found Kajabi, I was just got hooked. So yeah, I just built a little course for creatives and influencers to learn how to use this new business model to kind of leverage whatever they want to leverage their business without having to sell out to the whole advertising model or whatever. So that's sort of how it got started.
My suspicion is that a lot of our audience is facing a similar type of situation where where perhaps they have something that they'd like to share with the world. It could be something very small that might be accomplished well enough on Facebook or on a blog, or it might be something more formal where they want to come up with some kind of class teaching a skill or distributing some kind of knowledge. And for me, I've sensed for the last decade, that all these different technologies are coalescing, and it's we can do this, right? It's it's no longer really that difficult to pull off, but it's still difficult enough where it can be really overwhelming.
Right.
Because we kind of know what Instagram's like, we kind of know what Facebook's like, we know these basic interfaces and how to connect with the community and start developing an online presence, but combining all the bits and pieces of that, of how do you set up a payment system, how do you keep track of all the people that are interested in you and have a meaningful interaction, or there are so many little pieces that it can easily become just so overwhelming that people just kind of get frozen, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. And
so
I was
think
one of
it
those
takes,
people.
Right. But it takes somebody like you who I think is somewhat a rarity. Artists especially they're stereotypically, and I understand that there's a lot of people that aren't this way, stereotypically don't have much of a tech savvy bent.
Yeah.
Artists tend to be a little bit less inclined to go into machines and internet and technical stuff. So I think especially this community could really use an easy and welcoming user interface or way to access this capability and potential that is represented by the internet. So you found a specific platform, and you've tested
Yes.
all of them.
Uh-huh.
Can you tell us what the different pieces of the platform, or what problems does this platform
Yeah.
solve?
That we don't even
And
that
how?
we don't even know are. I think it's some in some ways it's like we don't know what's important, what really is important, and what really isn't that important. What we can kind of put aside, and what it's like this part of the blueprint is is critical, especially around the closing, as you said, Trenton. Like we may have it all, but then it's like you freeze before you think, like, launch and let's do this, and then what has to happen for that really to happen.
You know, the most interesting thing that I found about this process is that at the end of the day, the tech stuff is not the thing that becomes the obstacle. It's the and especially for me, it was the organization, it was the content creation, it was so you're not only building a course and building all that content, because that's like the real super intense, but then you may be learning a whole new thing, which is online marketing, which is like a totally different like half of the game, because once you have the thing and it's ready to go, then you have to really know how to get it in front of the right eyeballs, and which can be kind of intense, especially if you've you've ever gone into your Facebook power editor and looked at it and been like, oh my gosh,
What is the Facebook Power Editor? Just to
yeah, so that's just where you would promote okay, so basically in the marketing aspect, one of the best ways to do it is to put out a piece of free content to start building your list, and your list is going to be your audience of the people who kind of need your product and want that information. So once you build your free content, I love to do video content like webinars and stuff like that. Then Facebook's probably the best way to target your audience and get your free content to come up on their feed while they're just doing whatever on Facebook. So they'll be like, oh, look, a free training. Let me check this out, So that's part of the marketing stuff. So not only are you having to build your course, but you're having to build like, other content for your free marketing. But in terms of the tech part that can get super overwhelming for people who are non-techie or people who even are techie. The reason I'm in love with Kajabi is that it makes it so easy to have everything in one platform and kind of set everything up. So you have and Kajabi also does the marketing stuff too, which means that you can host your course. And so you have the back end of your course with, you'll have a login, and then people will be able to access your course with the login. But then you can also have a public area for your course, which would be your website, and then a blog also. And then you can also set up a whole marketing funnel with your course. And I think that Kajabi is the most elegant, definitely, platform that I've seen. So you can have like a landing page, which will then collect people's emails, and then then they'll be on your list, and then they can watch your free content. And then in your free content, you basically can offer them whatever you've made. And even if they don't decide to buy your course, then you at least have them on your list, and they can get to know you when you send out emails. So the formula for this is actually, the cool thing about this is you don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's a formula for all this stuff that totally works. The difficult part about for me anyway, like I'm a painter, and so I'm used to just being I'm like abstract all the time. But what I had to do was to actually discipline myself to use the other side of my brain when I was organizing the content that I was making for my. So what happened was I made my first course. I started to research how to turn a band into a business, and that was going to be my first course. But then I think I mentioned before I had like a mysterious illness, and I was just kind of in bed in my pajamas, like making stuff on my computer. And that's how I kind of got into this. Well, I kind of put together a protocol and pretty much healed myself, like an 80 to 90% healed myself. And then I realized, okay, this is the perfect example for me to make a course, and I'm going to teach myself how to do it and kind of learn to do it by doing it. So I literally went to Paris, and with just my only intention was just to like be surrounded by stuff that inspires me and drink some coffee and eat some cheese and make this course, which I did. But instead of taking, like, I thought it was going to take maybe a few months, it ended up taking almost 8 months for me to build my first course. And then once I built it, I realized, oh my gosh, all of a sudden I have a business, and I don't necessarily want to be a health, like any sort of, I actually don't want, like, I don't feel like my mission is to be, like, do this. Like, it's funny because as soon as you have a course, you're kind of like the authority. So what I learned was, and I also gained like 20 pounds in the process because I just was spending so much more time than usual on my computer. So then I had to make another protocol to lose like the 20 pounds because if you're going to be like sitting in front of your computer, like I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go get some like weights and like make sure that I take a few minutes off every few hours because I just like get so sucked into this stuff. But so anyway, the thing I learned how to make courses and really got obsessed with them. But then I realized you need to really be like dialed into what your message is and what you're here to really say before you really start, or else you're gonna be an authority or like have a product and then kind of realize that you need to know who your audience is first. That's what I learned.
I think it's interesting to me to hear you talk about that, because I think a lot of us have, the nature of creatives. I think creative people we have all these interests, and we have all, like, sometimes to the point of like mass distraction, right? We like all these things that we start to accumulate and things that we kind of obsess over at different points in our life. But it's a different process entirely to be able to take all of that massive information and interests and all these tangents, and from that create something that has structure and something that can then be consumable in a way that makes sense. Some kind of cohesive structure to then present it to somebody else. And those are two different processes, and sometimes can be a struggle.
Totally.
For people that are used to just kind of indulging in this, mindset where they're just bringing things in.
Well, and that's what I've been, when I talk to Sabrina, it's interesting because I totally get where she's coming from. Like, it's amazing to me and it's also very rare, I think, to be fine artist to this degree where you actually, it's like hard to do anything else, What
do you mean?
Because you have the ability to go so deep, like I think that's kind of a rare ability, into things. But for me, what I was, saying to Sabrina is that, like, part of the reason I have in the last few years have been able to make the course building process so efficient for me is that I made myself start doing it in a very methodical, very linear way, where I start with my idea, I do my outline, I don't record my courses until I finish my outline. and then I don't, even think about marketing till my videos are finished. So I make myself do it in a linear way, which is something that I don't do that for anything else I do. Like when I paint, it's totally nonlinear, So that was a really difficult thing for me to like retrain my brain to learn how to do. And then once I kind of did that, it made my process so efficient. And another thing with course building is also like copywriting and stuff. You have to turn everything into like an elevator pitch. Like you have to cut out all of the, you have to keep people engaged, which means it can't, it has to be like really amazing and in short, actually, because people have a really short attention span. Yeah. But with you, Sabrina, I actually feel like a lot of the rules that I had for course building, I kind of, for Sabrina, just said, like, forget this. Like, don't listen to this because yours is actually for artists. So you can probably be a lot more, like, just be intuitive, because your intuition is where your magic is with what you do. So you can break all the rules. But for the most part, for other things, it's a skill that's like a kind of annoying skill that I had to learn.
Well, Sabrina, we've talked about this in the past, just in regard to workshops, that there's this kind of established, I don't know, when you think of like a workshop, there's a structure, there's kind of a cliche, this thing that we have in our mind of what a workshop looks like, what it feels like, the kind of communication that happens there. And you didn't want that for your workshops. It didn't feel like that was the right tone that you wanted to set. So I remember talking a lot about this, like how you wanted to avoid that. You didn't want this to be a workshop for everybody. You wanted this to be a workshop for, a specific kind of person that would be really able to dig deep and get in, be present for that type of experience, right? And I think similarly, we have this notion of what an online class looks like, what it feels like. We've seen webinars, we've seen YouTube videos that are tutorial videos or demo videos. And my sense is that Sabrina doesn't want her online course to feel like that. She wants it to feel like...
And that's what I really responded to about Annabelle's. That was why I was like, what I loved is this sense of she was talking to me like she was a friend. She was talking... like, she's like, okay. What I liked is the tone of Annabelle's course was, starting off with "What about Bob?" referencing baby steps. Baby steps.
Baby steps.
Have you seen that, Trent? Have you seen that movie?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Classic.
So there is something about that felt personal, and I kind of got this rush of like, permission, like I can just be me when I do this. I don't have to be, like, how can I do this so I'm not have this really serious, like, this is not that serious. This is about liberation. Right. This is about freedom. And so I felt empowered to tackle that.
Well, that's the thing, is I see this a lot in teaching too, is that, or like being a news anchor, right? There's that kind of news anchor voice. And my suspicion is that when you go to, when you get that job, you probably don't talk to your family with a news anchor voice, but there's this sense that that's what news anchors do. They talk with that voice, right? Yeah. And I think similarly, like when people are making online courses, there's probably this perception or this assumption they have that they're supposed to talk and speak in a certain way. But really, what is so magical about the internet and so magical about these new technologies is we don't have to talk like that.
Yeah.
We don't. There is no template that we absolutely are beholden to. And in fact, what people are really searching for is an authentic voice, somebody who they can relate to and not feel like there's this disconnect of a formalized way of communicating. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the first things I say with my course. Like I mentioned before, your audience, picking your audience, like your specific audience, turning that audience into one person. And that person is your best friend. And you know who she is, where she shops, what she thinks about, what her fears are, what her expectations are, and most importantly, what her problem is, because you're going to be solving that for her or him. But And so starting there and just, writing the whole thing, or, like using the course as like a phone call or a book or something, and just talking to that one person. And so everyone who listens to that, well, first of all, everyone, that this will draw all the right people to you. And then everyone who hears what you're saying just feels like you're speaking to them directly. And that's like why it would be weird to do it any other way, so if you just can kind of like ease into yourself and connect and not be nervous about it or whatever, and just treat it like your best friend, then it just becomes like super easy. And for me, one of the questions I get a lot is, what if I say all the time? Like, should I how much editing should I do? That kind of stuff. And my response is usually, like, I make these crappy love songs. Let's like this project I did a few years ago that just like won't end. People still keep buying them. I don't even use a microphone. I use the mic on my laptop, and I can't listen to them because they're so bad. But the reason people like them is because they're just like totally raw. And a lot of times when I take my music into the studio and try to reproduce it, I can't do it. Like, the magic is in that raw place. And Sabrina, like, that's why everyone loves you, because you just have this ability to be so open and vulnerable, and people really respond to that. So, but again, there is with this specific stuff, people do have, short attention spans, and they don't have all day. So you have to find the happy medium there. And I
think that, also consider like the fact that there is just your laptop to record on, or, now we've got phones that are always with us. There's even more opportunity for us to be able to find the moments when we can be authentic, or the places where we can be authentic, and be able to record that, and be able to have that be part of our communication to other people. Like, you don't have to go to a recording studio anymore to record music. Now you can just do it
in your bed, in your pajamas,
in your pajamas in your bed, right? Yeah. So Annabelle, what would you say, are there categories of, or kind of, how can you help us create a mental model of how to approach this, or what things that we need to be considering? Are there kind of like the 5 pillars type, is there a model or a way of thinking of this?
Which aspect do you mean, Trenton? Like,
I mean, like, that's the thing, is that this whole thing, like in the beginning, you've got the marketing side, you've got the accumulation of email addresses, you've got the how do people sign up? You got the front end, the back end, Are there? This starts to really quickly feel overwhelming. Like,
exactly?
How do we think about all these moving pieces in a way that doesn't just shut us down?
Well, that's why the cool thing about this question is that, like, recently in the last 6 months, well, maybe like 7 months, since last summer, let's say, Kajabi started coming out with this, like a totally new system that made it even easier. So they started out amazing, and then they just have really been upping their game, and which is kind of annoying for me, because I make tutorials and then I keep having to like remake the tutorials, that actually shows people how to do the back end part. But the interesting part is that if you like, the most important stuff is not actually the technical stuff. I know that's where people think that they're going to get pushed over the edge, but there's so much help for that stuff. If you really can't handle it, there's tons of people out there who can, sort that stuff out for you. What people can't do for you is figure out like why you are here on Earth. And I think that's, for me, the most important part of course building. going into meditation and really connecting with what is your message, like what is your gift, and something I talk about in one of my free trainings is that there's a difference between a gift and a skill. You may have spent the last 20 years building a skill and maybe working your way up the corporate ladder, or, just doing something that you can do, you're good at, it's your skill, you're getting better at it. But a gift is something that you're just naturally good at, that people don't even think that they can kind of build their life around. So the first most important thing in course building, I would say, is figure out what your message is, and you can turn that message into a product. Like, so what I mean by the gift and skill thing, like maybe you've already, people have like regular jobs, but in terms of, I know a lot of artists like kind of do their art on the side and then just have a regular job. But if you figure out what you really love, you can, with course building, build your entire life around that. Like we've seen that with influencers who have just found a way to kind of, be food bloggers or, whatever it is, and figure out how to create a business model around that stuff. And course building is actually the secret business model for influencers, which a lot of influencers don't even know yet. But for artists, it doesn't even have to be art related. It could be like, someone who's super into knitting, it could be anything. Mm-hmm. So figuring out what your gift is and finding a way, and then also knowing what problem this gift is solving for whom, like who needs this and why. And once you can kind of connect with them, all the other pieces kind of come into place. And that's why I sort of mentioned Facebook before, because Facebook is one way that is an amazing, in a very easy way to kind of set up your little sales funnel thing with your free content and everything. But yeah, it is overwhelming, but if there are only like 10 pieces to it. And if you're not doing it from scratch, which normally if people build this kind of thing from scratch, they have like their website and they have like their members area and they have like all the different pieces and they have to put all of that stuff together. That's why I'm so obsessed with Kajabi, because really Kajabi just takes care of everything. Like everything right. You need is inside Kajabi. You open that thing up and then it basically, you can kind of figure out like how to do it technically. And on the other side, just knowing what problem you're solving, knowing who has that problem and how to reach them. And those are actually the most important questions, because once you nail, those are kind of like the foundational things. Once you kind of nail that stuff, the rest is just like you can kind of figure out. And another thing that's super cool about courses right now and the model with the free content is that there's so much free information out there mm-hmm. that you can just right. get started for free, and really figure it out. And then if you get to a point where you're downloading a million like PDFs and stuff and you feel overwhelmed, that's when you go to someone who's done it before and just do the formula. And the formula mm-hmm. is actually not that hard, but sometimes it's really nice to know like what the next step is going to be and how long that's going to take and where you might get stuck. So that's why course building courses are actually super helpful for the overwhelm, because the overwhelm can, it like, this is like a spiritual process, yeah. Making a course, because you really have to dig deep. And if you get it right, if you connect with your message, you all of a sudden, it's like it opens up your whole world. And the coolest thing about this is that once you kind of set up all of these pieces, you really can just put it on autopilot. Like this is so amazing for me because before, if I'm making a painting or something, like, that I'm trading my, hours for dollars. This is totally different, all of a sudden.
Explain a bit more of that. Yeah, sorry.
So like, if one person downloads my course or 500 people download my course, it's basically the same. So all of a sudden,
like, there's no more work for you to
exactly.
do.
I mean, I might have to hire some more assistant with like tech, like, like supporting the students or whatever to answer questions. But that's about it. So basically, you do it once and then it works for you. And you can put it on the autoresponder thing with like Evergreen Webinars, which is your free content that it can just like is constantly running 24 hours a day, like selling your course. And so the potential for this model, it makes it is just totally amazing because it just frees up your time, and then you can actually focus on other stuff or continue to build this stuff out, if that made any sense.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Earlier, you mentioned that it's really important to identify your audience, and that one way to do that is to envision like your best friend. Who is your audience? Could you give us an idea of like the person that you envision when you're giving your webinars, or who are you talking to?
Yeah, so it's funny because Sabrina would be my audience. Yeah, when I built Supercrush, so Supercrush is kind of like, I sort of inspired by 80s and 90s stuff. I find myself going back there, and it's interesting. I don't know if it's just me and I'm attracting what I'm into right now, but even on TV and stuff, I'm noticing that a lot of nostalgia kind of 80s and 90s stuff is coming back. Maybe that's just because people our age are making all this stuff right now. I don't know. But I'm really into this concept of what I call super crushing, which is just harnessing the energy that you had like when you were like in the 6th, 7th, or 8th grade, when you really had your first crush on someone, and it was like you weren't a kid and you also weren't like an adult yet, you weren't even in high school yet, you were just like, your heart was open and you were just ready to just like, everything was just like candy, And I think that is our power source. And I think that easily, the first time we get our heart broken, that shuts down. We put up a heart wall and then we shut off that power source. So with what I'm making right now, I'm trying to help people get back in. Well, my goal is anyway, to get back in touch with that super crush energy. I call it like sophisticated child self. So my course, I'm like building with that in mind. So my ideal audience resonates with that kind of like what Sabrina said, like, if I put like a clip from What About Bob in there and make that homework to watch that movie. Or also Jake Ryan, I'm super into 16 Candles for some reason. Like the moment when, Samantha walks out of the church at her sister's wedding, and Jake Ryan's like standing there in front of his like red Porsche, and she's like, me, yeah, you. I mean, that whole thing. It's just like, oh my gosh, like this is what is missing, and we grow up and we just do all this other stuff, and we have kids and we get married or whatever, or we don't, which I don't, but I still feel like that's where my power is, and that's what I want to reconnect with. So that's the kind of vibe I sort of bake into my little trainings and stuff. So the person I'm talking to is someone who gets that and thinks that like wants to connect with that part of their self. The ironic part of this is that this is what Sabrina is like known for and so good at doing. So that's like so amazing. It's such an honor to be working with her.
That's awesome. Well, one of the problems of recording in the morning is like I feel this urgency because I got to get up to school. But I think a couple things that I'm taking away, and maybe Sabrina, you can chime in too, is that it's important not to let yourself get too far ahead of, like, not let the, what's the saying, the cart before the horse. Like, you gotta, first and foremost, you've got to be able to identify what your message is, what you really care about, what's at the core, what you're really interested in, and understanding very clearly who your audience is. Who is it that you want to communicate with, and let that be the force that pushes forward the process of creating whatever course that you might be trying to create. And that the tools now, and Kajabi would be a fantastic place to start, it sounds like, are sophisticated enough and accessible enough that if you aren't able to pick it up by yourself, there's going to be a community of and free content on the online that is going to help you get through that fairly easily, right? So I don't know. It sounds like you're telling us not to get too overwhelmed by the tech and take that a step at a time and focus more on just getting the right content, right message.
Yes, totally.
Put together.
What's your message? You know, that message is a product. This stuff is so interesting because once you have your once you know what that is, you then have a platform to start a movement.
Right.
You know?
And you don't want to find yourself at the end having built up something that you don't really even care that much about. Like you were saying about the health stuff, maybe you feel strongly about it, but that's not really what you want to make your main focus or main priority.
Exactly. Because you do become, it all of a sudden you have a business, you know?
That's why I think, Trent,
I think something that you want to do. Yeah.
Trent, that's why I think that's
ahead,
like
Sabrina,
there's things that you and you're tinkering with things. Like I could see you doing, really looking at the things you really love doing, and I just keep coming back to like the 3D printing and things like that, where you love exploring this topic and this subject, and you know, I don't know, whatever. I know you've already created a lot of amazing content, but you know, in the future, I see some of these things that you have, you know, excitement around. Be really cool to see a course.
Well, and that's the wonderful thing to me to think about too, is that it can be so idiosyncratic. It can be so, like, it doesn't have to be this like appeals to everybody and can fit into
in fact it shouldn't.
A statewide curriculum, you know, right? Like,
yeah,
you
the
want
whole
it
thing
to be idiosyncratic. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, you need to, the more powerful your niche is, or your niche, or however people say that, that's where the power is at, because what you're doing is, like, you don't need to be, you know, Taylor Swift. You need, like, I don't remember what this is, but there was just this book that said something about you need 1,000 super fans. You just need 1,000 super fans to become a multimillionaire, something like that. I'm actually totally not, I'm butchering this, but it was something like you know, a few hundred people who are your hardcore fans. And Sabrina, like, you can attest to this. These people have been following your every move for 20 years. They are so desperate for your, well, desperate sounds a little bit negative, but they just are so into whatever you put out, that I keep saying, like, that what you're building, you know, once you have that little cult following, you don't need everyone. You know, you want to actually repel the rest of the people who don't get it, because those people are going to be the people complaining, the people asking, you know, expecting, you know, the people who are going to drag the vibe of your product down, you know. So you really, the niche part is the key to the foundation of whatever you make.
Right. So resist the temptation to try to make yourself into something that you're not, to make yourself more appealing to a wider audience or more palatable. It's in that specificity. It's in your quirks, in the uniquenesses that you embody, that people will really find connection and meaning, and don't sterilize yourself.
Your special
really,
sauce.
Your special.
Your special
I
sauce.
love that.
No, seriously, it's your special sauce that is the thing that makes your course different than everyone else's. Because, for me, for example, there are tons of people teaching how to make course building, but not from my perspective,
Right.
and not the way I do it, not the way all the tricks that I've figured out through my tested and tried and failed and succeeded. Everyone has their own process. And I think that courses are such an amazing way to show your process, because it's different than everyone else's. So your product is going to be totally different. Which is another thing that people always ask, like, what if someone has already done this? And I say, well, hey, what your special sauce is. If someone is already successfully doing this, perfect, because that there's an audience for that,
Do you know G-Love and Special Sauce?
Oh my gosh, totally. One time he stepped on my arm I was like leaning up against the stage before a concert started, and he stepped on my arm, and then he asked me out on a date.
You're joking me.
No.
Oh my gosh. You got asked out by G-Love?
Do you love it? Yeah. I'm sure he was like probably married at the time. This wasn't in the 90s. This was in like some 2000s thing, somewhere like at Colby College in Maine or somewhere. Anyway, it was funny.
Yeah. I'm thinking
Total
G-Love's
fan.
probably, yeah. That's awesome.
That should be the
Yep,
title of the
me too.
episode for sure. Special
Love
sauce.
G-Love. Special sauce, definitely. Should we go around and share a favorite something or other, or
Yeah, I absolutely love
Sabrina,
this conversation.
do you
I
feel like
absolutely
you
love it. I really,
said your piece? Do you
I
want
love hearing Annabelle talk about this, and it's exciting. And I just am excited for you, Trent, because you are such a wonderful teacher, and so it's even more exciting because lots of people do these courses, but they aren't gifted teachers, and you have that ability, and it's beautiful and so intuitive to you. So it's exciting to think you could teach about anything, and I'd watch it. Totally.
Thank you.
Yep.
Sign me up.
Thank you. Well, Annabelle, thank you so much for giving us your time. And where if people want to take these courses that you offer and how to do this stuff, where do they find you?
Sure. My website is supercrush.social, and you can find it. I've got tons of freebies and free trainings, and I think Sabrina has probably taken them all. So motivated. So supercrush.social is my website for my course building stuff.
Fantastic. And I'll definitely be checking those out. And the website that you use for the courseware, again, is Kajabi. How do you spell that?
Oh, it's so awesome. It's Kajabi, Kajabi. Oh, gosh. I think that's how you spell it. And I also, on my website, I have a link for 15% off. If people want to start up, they can use my link and get 15% off for a year. And even if you do the free trial, you can get a 30-day free trial or something. At the end of your trial, if you decide to keep it, you'll still get the 15% off, which is kind of a big deal because it's, but honestly, people, it's maybe $100 or something a month. But if you add up all the other software that you would have to put together, I actually ditched all my other software, and I'm saving so much money by just using Kajabi. I sound like a Kajabi evangelist. I really am just a huge fan. The guys who have the business are the ethos of the company is just amazing. Their Facebook page with their Facebook group is amazing. Their support's amazing.
Yeah.
They're amazing. So yeah.
Awesome. And we'll definitely be as Sabrina goes through this process and I continue to try to do something. We'll be checking in and, and
cool.
Giving updates as things progress. So.
Yeah, I'm so psyched for Sabrina's thing. I'm just giddy.
Thank you, Annabelle, for a great conversation. And we will see you next with a video episode coming very soon. Go out there, take your shoes off, and make some stuff.